Mahatma Gandhi is a global icon. His values of non-violence, social justice, civil liberty, women empowerment, and minority rights continue to remain equally relevant in contemporary times. During the unprecedented challenge of COVID pandemic, Gandhi's principles of holistic health, meditation, cleanliness, and community solidarity have gained even greater recognition. In Ireland, there is high respect for Gandhi across all sections of society. There is in principle agreement by Irish Post to release a commemorative stamp for Gandhi at 150. The Dublin City on its part has also expressed commitment for installation of a Gandhi bust in the city. Over the last year, the embassy has been organizing various events to commemorate the important anniversary, including inter-religious dialogues, panel discussions, exhibitions, release of books, community artwork, and Gandhi Peace Walk. An important closing event will be the virtual narration of Gandhi Katha by Dr Shobhana Radhakrishna, Chief Functionary at the Gandhian Forum for Ethical Corporate Governance. This will be on 28th of September, 11 to 12 noon local time. This will be live streamed for all of us to join, and I'm hopeful that there will be robust participation. As we approach the closing of the Gandhi at 150 celebrations on 2nd October this year, we pay tribute to the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi with inspiration and humility, and strengthened determination to incorporate the universally recognized principles in our daily lives. These are difficult times, but fortified with a solid value system, we shall prevail. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Ambassador, His Excellency Shri Sandeep Kumarji, for your kind message and the support. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's sacrifice, suffering, and the contribution in making Mohan into the Mahatma and inspiring thousands of women to fight against injustice and racial discrimination in South Africa and in the Indian freedom struggle in India is extraordinary. I express gratitude to the Embassy of India, Dublin, Ireland, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, His practices of health and wellness, of body, mind, and spirit, for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Ireland and convey my warm wishes to the Irish people and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Mahatma Gandhi's name finds resonance across the continents and continues to inspire countless people through his teachings of nonviolence. India and Ireland, that interaction that we have dates back to the 19th century when a significant number of Irishmen joined the British civil service, medical, engineering, and army service. During this period, Irish missionaries and educationists also spread out into all regions of India. Mahatma Gandhi admired Terence McSweeney, the mayor of Cork, whose hunger strike led to his death in October 1920. And the famous Irish playwright and the political activist George Bernard Shaw had famously said when someone asked for the impression of Mahatma Gandhi, he said, and I quote, "Impression of Mahatma Gandhi? You might as well ask for someone's impression of the Himalayas." On Gandhiji's assassination, George Bernard Shaw wrote that his death shows how dangerous it is to be good. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 98 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Mahatma Gandhi used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural backgrounds from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. One of his legacies is interfaith conflict dialogue through nonviolent means to establish harmony, unity, and brotherhood. In the ashram prayer in the morning and evening, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from India, used to be recited. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita ma gradha kasya svidhanam. That everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non-attachment. Enjoy it with a feeling of sacrifice to the extent that is necessary for you. And leave the rest for the society. Never ever crave the possession of others. Nothing really belongs to you. I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn, which explains this same sentiment of renounce and rejoice according decades after Gandhiji passed on. In every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, public, or personal life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of the political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, non-violence, purity of means, love, self-control, forgiveness, respect, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of Satyagraha or nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience was by non cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, and soul force through suffering and self sacrifice. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of the fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by non-violent means. His legacy of Satyagraha is widely recognized and practiced the world over and then is seen in many movements for social rights in the contemporary world. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices or the environmental credo were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Mahatma Gandhi had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale and had said that greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis, which he had predicted a century ago. He was the first environmentalist, much before the entire world was preoccupied by the concerns of environment and ecological degradation. And with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. Further, he had said, the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. He may well have been kept in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village, or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self-reliant, independent, self-governed village, is built on the premises of sustainable growth. That is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, his revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all parts of the globe, at all times, and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. On that path, hundreds of world teachers had already walked. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards to find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. And this he did by repeated questioning. And that question was Ko aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, Truth is God, Satya hi Parameshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Mahatma Gandhi had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone, and that is one of his traits. He respected individuals as individuals without attaching labels. That is another trait. He remained ever positive and calm in spite of all the challenges that he faced in life. That we see as another trait. And another trait that we see is that he treated all work as God given work and did everything with equal reverence. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that brought him to the notice of the Western world. In 1931, on his way back from the Second Round Table Conference in London, Mahatma Gandhi stopped by in Switzerland for 5 days and spent those days in Villeneuve with Romeo Rolla, discussing the crisis of civilization. And Romerola wrote, and I quote, This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops. I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, word, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान।
Mahatma Gandhi realized that untruth, injustice, oppression, and tyranny last only as long as their victims accept them. The moment one learns to say no to untruth and injustice, their edifice collapses immediately. This was true for the political, the economic, and the social order. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, respect, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force, self suffering, and sacrifice. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And listen to his.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Mahatma Gandhi was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. He is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for all of us. But the effort has to begin from a point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. But if you want to understand Mahatma Gandhi, you will have to understand him not only with the intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him from different perspectives. And some people will think of Gandhiji mostly as a politician, but at the same time, some would think of him as a saint. And there are others who will think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all this, but I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to find out what is that common stream in all these different aspects of life that you see in his personality. One was the commitment to values, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work that he did. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique blend of, for example, enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, environment, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, reforms, education, politics, society, and many, many more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these 7 social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, and worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, "My life is my message." John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, an anti war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and later in Delhi in 1947. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." So, the Time magazine had listed out 3 most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of nonviolence in all 3. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi seashore with 79 fellow marchers, walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches in the morning and evening to mobilize people to participate in the non-cooperation Salt Satyagraha, covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. On 6th April, in the early hours of the morning, when he bent down to pick up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him, and towards the end of the Salt Satyagraha, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news worldwide. William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present during the Salt Satyagraha at Dharasana Salt Depot, and his graphic reporting of torture and inhumanity and barbarity of the British brought the incidents to the notice of the world. So Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global ambassador of nonviolence, a youth icon who opposed all forms of injustice, an apostle of peace and nonviolence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. I would like to play a Gandhi Katha hymn which explains his philosophy of truth, nonviolence, and purity of means, which combine together in the form of Satyagraha. It is called Lagire Lagan, Satya Ahimsa mein man mein.
लागे रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागे रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन.
Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi spent his formative years till the age of 18 years in India, where the seeds of spirituality were sown. He spent 3 years in London studying for law, and that is where he met the reformers and thinkers of that time. He read the great works of the poets and philosophers of the West, and his vision broadened. His curiosity in religion is also started as he started reading about religions. And he became a barrister in London and learned citizenship. He spent 20 years in South Africa as a political leader and a social organizer. It is here that he discovered Satyagraha. In 1904 in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of self control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and Sarvodaya, welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, two in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and two ashrams in India, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917, and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha, Maharashtra in 1936. Here, Kasturba Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and the ashram community lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashrams were his ideals of a non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity, the first being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis for offering the highest sacrifice of life in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor by establishing their self respect and dignity. His ashrams also were the place where he carried out all his work in the spirit of self reliance, cleanliness, service to humanity for realizing his vision of a village republic or Gram Swaraj. I am happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his prayer, his spinning, and his silence, gave him the inner strength. And they were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the ashram community that he had founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. He carried out his experiments in health and wellness in the ashram through nature cure, diet control, fasting, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. And these were really affordable to the poorest of the poor, and it was possible for all of them to treat themselves through this kind of method. So ashram inmates also participated in all his experiments. Our friend and the British Quaker, Sir Horace Alexander, lived in Gandhiji's ashrams, both the ashrams for quite some time, and he noticed that in the daytime the bell used to ring 56 times. He said, and I quote, Gandhi had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learnt how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. So here, Mahatma Gandhi stands in front of us as the role model for punctuality, promptness, and discipline. He has given three gifts to humanity. The first one is Satyagraha, the second one is constructive programs, and the third one is Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules formulated by him for the ashram community for spiritual progress and voluntary self control. The principle behind the Ekadasha Vrata was to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian-Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram Ashram in 1978 and he stayed there for a week. Every day he sat in Bapu Kuti or Mahatma Gandhi's cottage, which was a very simple structure made up of bamboo, thatched palm leaves, and mud. And he said, and I quote, "This hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness, which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness." Though Gandhiji's role and contributions to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and wellness. Mahatma Gandhi was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was a firm believer and practitioner of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting from a very young age and continued in the ashrams. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. He was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Gandhiji's message to the world on the vital question of health and well-being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was very simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self-control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, values, the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. He was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us. And every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what we have been told by our ancient seers and sages in India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, says, "You are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is the same as what is going on in the universe." From the mind-body perspective, Mahatma Gandhi's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient traditions of India which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind. Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, a prolific writer, and an educator who visited Mahatma Gandhi in the Sabarmati ashram in 1929 and wrote that Gandhi's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion and truth and reality. Very few people know that as a couple, Mahatma Gandhi and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, treating the patients selflessly as frontline workers in the service of humanity in South Africa as well as in India. In the Spanish flu influenza pandemic of 1918, Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity and maintain physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, and gave correct information. They helped them for being positive through prayers, meditation, and chanting, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. I beg your pardon. Now listen in to a Gandhi Katha dhun, which describes his philosophy of life.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल.
Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self-restraint or of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desires. As early as 1906, Mahatma Gandhi had started writing about health and well-being, and in 1942, he wrote a book called Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the COVID-19 pandemic. The second is the serious and long-drawn financial crisis. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Gandhiji whose life was so transparent, so open, so honest, so truthful, and there is so much to learn from him. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness, that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, connected as brothers and sisters. And whether we choose to see it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava or global citizen and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thought, action, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear, and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction, death, and the mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. If still we want to return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given the wake up call. This kind of lifestyle of anti consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and the poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and chanting relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up. The thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, positivity, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, fearlessness, and remaining positive. Therefore, Mahatma Gandhi comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru as well as a lifestyle guru. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of crisis. Mahatma Gandhi's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, positive thinking, empowerment for self care, and the care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om Peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end today's Gandhi Katha with the hymn Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on earth be auspicious.
शुभ मंगल हो शुभ